40 men, fed for 4 days by people who owed them nothing.
Tari Parodi Radio, the American station.
So they decided to leave.
They dug the boat out of the sand. They patched the seams with what they had. They stripped naked to push it off the bar. Their clothes went in the bottom of the hull to keep them dry.
They got 2 crossbow shots out. Then a wave turned it over.
3 men held on to the boat. It carried them under. They did not come up. One of them was Alonso de Solis, the assessor of the expedition.
The rest reached the sand, naked in November, with no clothes, no fire, no food, and no boat. Everything they owned was in the bottom of that hull.
An hour before, we were men who had decided to leave. Now, we were on that beach the way we came into the world, and colder.
At sunset, the islanders came back, expecting to find the Spaniards gone.
And they found 40 naked men on cold sand, with 3 of their number drowned.
They sat down among them, and they began to weep.
Out loud, all of them together, for more than half an hour.
Not out of fear, not as a ceremony. He is clear about it. They wept because of what had just happened to the strangers.
I had spent a year expecting a fight or a surrender. What arrived was grief on our behalf from people who had already fed us twice.
Then they went home and came back and carried the men who could not walk. They carried them at a run, and along the path they had lit 4 or 5 very large fires.
Fires at intervals the whole way, so that naked men would not die of cold between one and the next. Somebody had thought about that in advance.
We built 5 ships out of horses. It took the sea 1 wave.
Nobody proposed building another one. There was no iron left on that island to build it with. A barrier island off the coast of Texas, November 1528. He named the island himself, and the name is the review. Malhado, bad luck, ill fortune. Where it is, we do not know. Popular accounts have said Galveston Island since the 1890s. Most specialists now say Follett's Island, next door, once called San Luis.
The argument is settled by his own tape measure. He gives the island as half a league across and 5 leagues long. That is about 1.5 miles by 15. Galveston is 27 miles long. Galveston has a seawall on it now, 17 feet high, put up after a hurricane killed 6,000 people there in 1900. That is the last time this episode mentions the present.
One more thing, said once and then not raised again. The names in this story for the peoples of this coast, Kapokes, Han, and later others, are his names. He heard them in a language he did not have and wrote them down years afterwards. He does not even spell them the same way twice. The people he calls Kapokes in one chapter are Keokes in another.
Scholars have spent a century arguing about who they were, and they have not agreed. So we are going to use his words. And we are not going to tell you who these people became. Nobody honestly knows.
And a few days later, a thing arrived on that island that changed the count. A trade object carried across from the mainland. Cabeza de Vaca recognized it as Spanish.
There was another boat. It had come apart 1.5 leagues away the day before his did.
He sent 2 islanders and 2 Christians to find them. Andres Dorantes, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, and Estevanico.
2 wrecks, a day and 1 league apart, neither knowing the other existed. Add them together, and you get the number this episode is named after.
80.
The Spaniards assumed they had landed on people who were hiding food from them.
They had not.
This is a lean barrier coast with a hard calendar. The people on it run a year that has no slack anywhere in it. In winter, roots dug out of cold water by hand, underwater, for hours until the fingers split. Fish, when the fish are there, taken in weirs of cane oysters for 3 months of the year, blackberries in their season, and then everybody moves because the food has moved. Nobody on this coast stores a surplus because there is no surplus to store, and nothing here keeps.
These people were not poor, they were expert. They were running a survival system with a margin so thin that 80 extra mouths in November was a genuine emergency.
They took them in anyway.
80 men who could not fish, could not dig, could not read the season, and could not be sent away. That is what mercy cost on that island. And it was paid by people who were already thin.
The treasurer of this expedition spent his first American winter pulling roots out of freezing mud with his hands, and I was bad at it. Everybody else there had done it since they were 4 years old. I have audited silver mines. I could not find a root.
Then a disease went through the island. It killed about half the people who lived on it. Whole households, elders who held the fishing knowledge, children.
And it did not kill the Spaniards, which the islanders noticed immediately, because they were not stupid.
So they held a discussion about killing the strangers who had arrived just before their people started dying.
And that is the correct discussion. On the evidence available to them, it is what you would have concluded too.
One man argued them out of it, and the argument is on the record in Cabeza de Vaca's own words.
If these people had such power, they would not have let so many of their own die. Look at how few of them are left. Look at what the sea did to them. Nobody who could stop a death would have permitted that one.
It is a better piece of reasoning than anything said on the beach in Florida in April.
And it saved the lives of the men who would eventually write all of this down.
I found out afterwards how close that had been. Nobody in that discussion was a savage. They were doing medicine with what they had, and they got the answer right.
Then the islanders required the Spaniards to cure the sick. Their own healers worked by breathing on a person and laying on hands and drawing the sickness out. They saw no reason at all that strangers could not do the same thing. Strangers who had arrived out of the sea survived a sickness that killed half the island and could not be explained.
The Spaniards laughed and said they did not have the art.
So the islanders stopped feeding them. He is careful about what happened next, and this program is going to be careful with him. They prayed. They made the sign of the cross over the sick. They breathed on them. They said a Pater Noster and an Ave Maria. They did it because they were hungry, and they were honest about that afterwards.
And the sick got up and said they were well and gave them food.
I am not going to tell you what that was. I wrote this account for a king who would have made me rich for the answer, and I did not give him one either.
Deep winter. Nothing was left that had ever shown a man's station. No cloth, no sword, no hat, no horse, no seal, no shoes.
And they were still doing precedence.
Who eats first? Who sleeps nearest the fire? Whether a gentleman carries a load or supervises one.
A man citing a rank granted by a document at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico to another naked man on a sandbar in the cold.
And it was not stupidity. It was the last structure any of them had.
Take away a man's country and his tools and his clothes, and he will hold on to the queue.
We had lost the ships, the horses, the iron, the clothes, and the king. The last thing any of us would put down was the order we stood in.
That is the last funny thing in this story. Hold on to it, because we are not coming back for another one. 5
Christians were camped apart further along the coast. Their names were Sierra, Diego Lopez, Corral, Palacios, and Gonzalo Ruiz. They ran out of food. They ate one another, one at a time, until there was one left.
And there is no ending to that sentence, because the last man was alone. He starved, with nobody to do it to him. And the islanders found out, and were horrified.
So horrified that the rest of the Spaniards were, again, nearly killed for it.
They were disgusted with us. I have never been able to write that sentence any other way.
That is the whole of it. We are not going to mention it again.
The muster roll had rotted. There was no paper on that island, and there would not be paper again for 8 years.
So he said it out loud instead, at night, from memory.
The names read by a clerk at Sanlúcar de Barrameda in June 1527.
Alonso del Castillo Maldonado of Salamanca. Andres Dorantes de Carranza, captain. Jerónimo de Alaniz, notary. Fray Juan Suarez, commissary. Doroteo Teodoro, a Greek. Estevanico of Azamur.
A black man, Arabic-speaking, native of Azamur, the property of Andres Dorantes.
Pedro, another Pedro. No, that is wrong.
He got one name wrong, corrected himself, got it wrong again, and stopped.
I could hold 600 names in my head in June. I could hold 400 in November. I did not lose the men first. I lost the list.
And because it is the only ending he knows for a list, he finished it the way a notary finishes one, of which I so attest.
On a sandbar, with no paper, no seal, no witness, and nobody to attest it to.
The rest of the winter is a count, and it is going to be delivered as one. Cold, hunger, men who lay down in the morning and were still there at night. Men who walked up the beach and were not on it by first light. The camp split between the island and the mainland to spread the load, and the mainland camp did worse.
80.
By the turn of the year, 40. The mainland camp did worse than the island camp, and the island camp was not doing well.
40.
When the weather turned, 15.
15 men out of 2 boats, out of 5, out of 600, and not one of them died fighting anybody. They died of cold and of hunger and of being wrong about a coastline.
And there is a second column in that ledger, and it is only fair to read it. Half the people of the island were dead as well.
The same winter took both. Only one of the 2 groups had anywhere else to be.
The island lost people who knew where the weirs went and when the roots came, and that knowledge does not come back in a season.
The Spaniards were a bad winter. The sickness was a wound that lasted generations.
He watched them bury their own, and he understood something he had not understood in Spain.
This is not a disaster that started when I arrived. This is a coast where people die, and other people keep going. And it has been like that for a very long time.
In spring, the islanders crossed to the mainland for the root season, and the Spaniards went with them. There was nowhere else to be, and nothing to be it with. And the 15 were split up, 1 or 2 to a household, and put to work, carrying, digging, hauling wood and water. And he uses a word for it in his own account more than once. He calls himself a slave.
He never once uses that word about Estevanico.
That Estevanico was the property of Andres Dorantes, his own record. It is on the muster roll, and in the Viceroy's correspondence, and in the reports filed afterwards.
It is in the paperwork of the Spanish state. It is not in the book written by the man who walked beside him for 6 years.
Somebody handed the treasurer of the expedition a load and pointed, and the treasurer of the expedition picked it up. There was no argument in me about it. I was hungry, and the load had to go up the beach.
8 months earlier, he had police authority over the entire province of Florida.
Then the groups dispersed, and the 15 went with them. Different households, different stretches of coast, different seasons. There was no way to send word and no reason to think anybody would be alive to receive it.
3 of the names go out of this story here, and you should not put any weight on them yet. Andres Dorantes, Alonso del Castillo, and the man Dorantes owned, Estevanico.
They are simply 3 more men on a list that is getting shorter.
Nothing in the record says any of the 4 expected to see each other again.
And they did not for 3 years. It is the spring of 1529. The next time those 4 men stand in the same place will be 1532. They will not get away until 1534.
He does not know either of those numbers. He has no calendar, no priest, no bell, and no paper.
I stopped counting the days that winter. Not because I gave up, because a number you cannot check is just a thing you tell yourself.